All right, welcome back to the You Can For You podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, and that's the Vertigo Center, helping you find balance when the world won't stop spinning. If you or a loved one are struggling with dizziness, vertigo, or imbalance, please visit thevertigocenter.com to take your first step towards steady living. So we have a very special guest on today. We have Kevin O'Connor, and Kevin is the president and founder of the Spiritus Group. Kevin is an entrepreneur, business mentor, life coach, men's coach, and a management consultant. Kevin is also a parent who's navigated the highs and lows of youth hockey, raising a son who now plays as a professional goalie. So we'll explore what it takes to support a young athlete, the unique challenges of parenting a goalie, and lessons that apply to all sports parents. So, Kevin, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure, Rockne. Great to be here. And a shout out to your mom because I'll be calling here around my own personal vertigo,
There you go.
which is a pretty
She'll
debilitating. People underestimate the impact of vertigo, but if you've ever had it, it's like being car sick or seasick, and it comes in waves, and it's very debilitating. People don't really
yeah.
understand it, but when you have it, it throws your whole day off. So I've been experiencing some, and I'll be calling your mom.
Yeah, I got to work with her for a couple of years, and some of the cases that we saw were pretty crazy. People come in, and then once they're fixed and they come back, they don't even look like the same person anymore.
Yeah,
So it's pretty crazy. What she does is magic.
So how do you want to go about this? What do you want to chat about? My brain is full of ideas and thoughts, and I've had a lot of experiences. I'm old enough to be your grandpa, probably. So,
Well, you've gone through it. Your son made it to the highest level, and so I want you to kind of take us on your journey as a parent and reflect back, like with your kids in sports, and now as you reflect back, like what was that journey like for you? What did you learn about yourself? How did you start out when your kids were young? How did you show up as a parent versus as they started to progress and get to the higher level? What changes did you make as a parent? Hopefully, some parents who are listening to this can walk away with some advice, feedback, actionable steps on how they show up for their kids.
I think in hindsight, I was operating from a level of intuition, and I had a father who was very uninvolved in my life. So, there wasn't a lot of mentorship, support, guidance. He didn't really have any context for the types of stuff that I was doing, and I was an athlete growing up. So I knew that I wanted to be a very involved parent. And I can tell you that a couple of the things that I did as a parent, I'm really proud of. And it's hard for people to replicate that. But because I worked for myself or had some flexibility, I was
Hmm.
able to be at the first day of school for both of my children for every day. Every year, I mean, every year they started school, I was there with them, and I also went to every parent-teacher interview for their school years, and I also attended. I bet you, 95% of every one of their, extracurricular activities. So, and I really felt that my job was to be a supporter, to encourage, to have them feel like there was somebody who was caring about them that was involved. Um, I also made a decision not to meddle. So there's really that separation between interfering and adding value. So,
Hmm.
and it's really a decision between what is it like to be a parent versus what is it like to be coaching your kid.
Yeah.
And I separate out the two and I say if you have a decision to make between coaching and parenting, choose the parenting because you are
Hmm.
not your kid's coach, you're their parent. Parent is a much more expansive, broader, more satisfying choice than to be somebody's coach. I mean, coach is very focused, it's very limiting, and you can be the most wonderful coach and have the most insight, but ultimately your son or daughter is going to need you to be a parent. And if they see you in that coaching, with that coaching hat on, you're going to lose the opportunity to have deep, intimate discussions about things that are much more important than a sport. And while sports are important in terms of the formative years, they help you develop character, they give you focus, they help you understand discipline, they make you more comfortable with your body, a whole range of things. It's They're still games. And my son puts it in perspective. He's a professional goalie. He said, Dad, I stop a frozen piece of galvanized rubber for a living. And when he says that, he says that's it. So let's not make it anything more than something slides along the ice or flies through the air. And my job is to get in the way of it.
Yeah.
And in the big scheme of things, that's not, curing cancer. That's not, promoting world peace. You can use your skills as an athlete and your influence as an athlete to make a difference. But sometimes we focus in on the sport as if it's the only thing, and it's not the only thing. So if your kids know it's not the only thing, if they know there's more to life than that sport, they're likely to be able to handle the ups and downs of sports much better because that's not their raison d'etre. They're not there exclusively for that sport, which if they were, that's an awful lot of pressure. And young people don't need that kind of pressure. There's already enough distractions and pressure in the world as it is. So
Yeah.
it's really a decision about understanding the difference between parenting and coaching.
And what does that look like? So I coach kids in strength and conditioning, and I'm not a parent, so I'm purely a coach. So what does that look like, the difference between parenting and coaching?
Well, sometimes maybe flip that around. Maybe it's what doesn't it look like?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Because
That's a good way to put it.
so there's that saying about Michelangelo who was, carving David out of marble. And somebody said, "How do you do that?" He says, "I just saw David and I took the marble away." So as a
Mm,
parent, you want to look at your behavior from the perspective of how do you want to see yourself in relationship with your children? And then remove the noise and remove the stuff that's around that. So, for example, do you add value standing in the sidelines screaming at your kid? Does that actually have a positive impact on their performance, how they appreciate the sport, how they respond in stressful situations? Is it like being a vocal, outspoken, loud parent? Is really, in my mind, an indication you have no self control and no discipline, and you need to man up. Being able to express anger, like just let it go, is not what I associate with healthy masculine behavior. Being able to, when you talk to these guys who are MMA fighters or elite martial artists, it's their calm, it's their reserved nature, it's their understanding their own power and influence that sets them apart. It's not by bravado or yelling at people in the bar and picking fights. Those are actually not the people you want to aspire to. So, look at your own behavior when you're at an event. Are you screaming at your kid? And I think I've told you this story before about, Matt he's a professional goalie. Youth hockey, playing nets. Maybe he's 10 years of age. And I'm yelling a little bit. I'm getting it. Oh, come on. And he comes off the ice later and he says, "Hey, Dad." I said, "Why?" He said, "Do you think I stop the puck more when you yell at me? Because I can hear you." I was like, probably not. Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with, like, he was a pretty bright kid. It doesn't really have anything to do with how I play.
yeah,
And so, it's whether or not at that moment in time you are, you know, there's a difference between shining the light and helping your sons or daughter illuminate, see where they're going, and putting on a heat light lamp and burning their ass. And if the heat is too high, they're not going to perform. But if you are a beacon of light and you are illuminating and helping them see what's possible, you're an inspiration. So
yeah,
ask yourself, does your kid inspired by you? Are they afraid of you? Are they nervous? Do they come off out of the game with their head held down, knowing that you're going to chew them out? So there are probably a lot of things that you want to remove that are kind of impulse oriented, that are attached to your ego, to attach to your living vicariously through your children. So I think it's all about removing the shit and being your purest, most grounded, most masculine, most inspiring man possible for your daughter or your son. And they will look up to you as somebody who can provide them with support and encouragement in their life, not just in the sport.
When that happened and Matt came up to you as a 10-year-old and said that, how did what came up for you when he said that? Were you expecting that? Like what was going on through your mind?
No, I wasn't expecting it, and honestly, I felt pretty embarrassed. It's like, ooh,
Yeah,
because like that's not how I want to see myself. And
right.
I could tell you, and if anybody's watching whose son is a pitcher or a goalie in any sport, where they or a quarterback, um,
Yeah.
there's a certain level of scrutiny on that kid, that golfer. Like, these are tough. A figure skater. Anytime when that person is central, like Matt can't get off the ice. Like he
Hmm.
has like the puck goes in, and maybe it was a softie. Even at his age, he's 33 years of age, 10 years of professional hockey. There's many goals that one would want back, but he's not going to jump over the boards and sit down there and have a drink of water and go, okay, next shift. He can't
Right.
hide. So anytime somebody's in a place where they can't hide, they're already under pressure in a unique way. That's not to say these other positions aren't stressful. It's just that they're just different. And so you
Yeah.
need as a parent to be accepting that you're different. There's not a lot of goalies who put dads who dad goalies who when they have kids put their kids as a goalie.
Yeah.
They go like I want to, or a defenseman. So or they may know maybe defenses are like because they feel for the goalie and they go like be a good defenseman and keep your goalie safe. But yeah, so it was just an opportunity to build some awareness and make the adjustment. And I'm glad he did it at 10 as opposed to having it at 16 saying that like for 10 years you've been yelling at me.
And what age did Matt start playing hockey?
He started playing around 6 in outdoor rink, and we're Canadian from Toronto. So his first season was just, and they rotated the positions, and he used to he jumped into goaltending, and he liked that. We did a lot of fun things, like when he was skating, I would always encourage, they tell you that Zamboti's coming out, be the last one off the ice. We'd play a game where I would say a couple more laps, and he'd skate really hard around the ice to be the last kid off the ice. So I'm
Yeah.
very competitive. So I just tried to make working hard fun. And then he went on to, he was never, this is the other thing, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. If you look at any sort of youth sports, it's rare that the kids who are shining at 10, 11, 12 are the kids that made it to pro hockey. Even at it is college, Boston College, not Boston College, Boston University. I shouldn't say Boston College. That's
Yeah,
the
you better be careful
Arch
with you better be
Arch
careful with
enemy.
that.
That's right. I know. At Boston University, BU, um, he was on a great team. Some of the guys who've had staying power, at least a couple of them, were not the stars. And one or two were, like Jack Eichel, but some of them were just you're on this trajectory, or you want to have a sustainable um, career. So he was never the superstar at 12 or 13. He was just solid. He got better and he got better and he got better and made that switch. Didn't go to major junior hockey. Went to the USHL, then went to college hockey, then went pro after that. Yeah.
I think that's so interesting because some kids are really good as younger kids, 10, 11, 12. And what is it about that age group that parents have they're so invested in having the kid on multiple teams, specializing in sport, thinking like we're going to invest all of these time, money, and resources to playing just this
Yeah.
one sport, and then you know as they get older, it starts to fizzle out. Why do you think that age is so like parents just invest so much time? and money and energy into sports specific skill.
Well, remember, sports at youth sports are a business. So when you get, especially in hockey, and you get on Toronto where there are 40,000 kids playing hockey, and there's an entire AAA loop right in the city, so you don't have to be on a traveling team and travel 4 hours. You travel
Mm. Really?
45 minutes and you're playing another AAA hockey team.
Yeah.
Um, but those teams, those AAA teams, they got a paid coach. Now he's not full time, but he's making decent money coaching. And
Mhm.
so anytime you create a commercial environment, you can be influenced by wealth. Things become that much more important. You professionalize the sport. Um, and so it becomes kind of a culture. So as a parent, if you know nothing and you're pulled along with this, I guess I have to put him in summer hockey, 3-on-3. I guess I have to do this and that. Ultimately, there's two things, I think three things you want to be able to do. Emphasize their schoolwork. Two, ensure that they have an opportunity to develop the skills. And
Mhm.
three, teach them about their body and how to look after their body and how to strengthen their body and maintain mobility. Most of the professional sports now, when they're training, they're not training to improve performance. They're training to improve performance over time by maximizing recovery and ensuring that they keep their strength. So the guys that last the longest are the guys who take the greatest care of their body, not the guys who deadlift the most or do a bench press. This is not the NFL combine. This is about uh, sustainability. It's about consistency. So if your kids are active and they're healthy and they have good hand-eye coordination and you're putting them at different events and they're getting a higher level of skills and fitness, great. Because once they hit puberty, if they're in a position and their body doesn't grow, and that's a position that's associated with a certain, like my son's a very tall goaltender. If he had to focus his entire life of goaltending and peaked at 5'10", it's an uphill battle. Um,
Mhm.
he's 6'6". It's a great
Yeah.
height for a goaltender. He's on his knees. His shoulders are at the top of the net. So it's all about perspective. I remember a story that um, I had two great presentations. One from an agent when Matt was 15. And he was on a team where 11 of the 14, 15 kids got drafted into major junior hockey. And the professional agent came, made the presentation to the parents and said, look, I want to tell you one thing. There may be one person in this room who might get to play at a high level, maybe two. You have a pretty good team, and go to college or play major junior hockey. Maybe one or two of you will get to play pro hockey. The rest of you are playing hockey because it's fun. So if ever there's a time to focus on your school, make sure you do your history classes. You go to class. Make sure it's grade 10, so this would be what you guys would call sophomores. You're doing the work because you're going to need your academics because for the most part, you know, you all think you have a plan A, you don't want a plan B, you need a plan B because the odds are against you. So
Yeah.
it's about perspective. The other thing I remember a guy from, I think he was the coach of St. Lawrence College, came in a presentation. He said, every summer I run a camp for 50 kids. These are all elite hockey players. And I stand up at the end and I say, I just want to tell you something. Based on the odds, I want to give you a real perspective. One or maybe two of your kids are going to make it to pro. Maybe based on the number. You can do the math in the NHL. There are 30 teams. You know how many people are on, how many defensemen are on each team in the AHL. And, there's a lot of kids playing hockey. So
Mhm.
he says, I expected that the parents would come up and say, hey, thanks for that reality check. There's a lot of pressure on my son. He said, instead, parents came up and say, my kids are, my kid is the one or two. And he said it
Yeah.
had the opposite effect. What it did was no parent, every parent still heard, yeah, but that's my kid. And
Yeah.
it's okay to have goals. It's okay, but, and I'm not saying, give up, but I'm saying that if you have if there's an overemphasis on anything, the balance that you're providing as a parent is likely to get screwed off. I think as a
Right.
parent, Rockne, what you're trying to do is you're trying to remove barriers. You're trying to see ahead of the game and go like, I could see how this world works. So what can I do to help him understand what might work for him? Like in Matt's case, reaching out to college coaches when he was a junior, in high school, and saying, "Hey, this is who I am. I'd love you to come up and watch some games." Being proactive, just like you would be if you're in a business or if you were in a profession, but not doing the work for your kids. You're not your
Yeah.
kid's agent either. That's the other thing. You're
Hmm.
not their coach. You're not their agent.
Yeah. Prepare the child for the path, not the path for the child.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay,
And
this is what you're going to face. How are you going to deal with that? Matt Casey had to get released from a hockey team because he wanted to go to another hockey team. And in the GTHL in Toronto at that time, you signed a 2-year card, which means that you sign on for a team for 2 years. At the end of the first year, if you want to leave, they have to give you permission to leave. It's kind of a
yeah.
and most parents would call their coach and say, I think my son wants to move on to another team. Matt was 14. I said, you want to move to another team? You got to call your coach. What do you
Yeah.
mean? What do you mean? I said, you pick up the phone. You want to go to another team. That's the way the world works. It's not I'm not going to do it for you.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I was kind of a bit of a hard ass, maybe. But I was younger. I was pretty strict. But he did. And the guy said, okay. I remember he was coached by a 20-year NHL veteran, Steve Thomas. And he was on a team. He was a goalie, and the other goalie was very, very successful. Was going to go high in the draft for major junior hockey. And every time Matt was going to play, they weren't rotating fully. They were going 60-40. Every time he'd show up to the rink for a game, the coach would say, Matt, we're not starting you tonight. Somebody's coming from the Belleville Bulls to watch
Yeah.
this guy. So he kept getting, finally, after like 25 days of not playing, he's like, I'm pretty discouraged. Like, I keep getting the rug pulled out of me because they want to showcase this guy. And
Hmm.
I said, how do you feel about this? I'm pretty discouraged. Call your coach. So he picked up the phone and he calls Steve Thomas, who's been, I think he played 1,000 games in the NHL. And he said, Coach, it's not, this is freaking me out a little bit. It's hard to show up, be ready for a game, thinking about it all day, and then just go to the game and say, not tonight, Matt. Not tonight.
Hmm.
And, and the guy, and it was interesting because he was well received, but in a sense, but at the same time, he got a real sense that um, of I guess the the fact that this was hard for Steve at a certain level, as if it's somehow he was hoping that Matt would understand. Matt didn't. I'm not here to understand the predicament you're in. I'm telling you, I'm ready to play. I
Yeah.
think what happened was finally after 25, days of not playing, they put him in a really tough game, and he got a shutout. And it was like, oh, now that you've sat around for 3 weeks, let's put you in a tough game. And he excelled. The long story is that the guy was a great goalie in major junior hockey, and then may have played a season in the minors, and then never played any more hockey after that. And Matt's
Hmm.
been playing 10 years all over the world. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And just, focus on what you want to do and be supportive.
When when did you know that like Matt had a real shot at this? At going pro? Like what was that perspective like where it's like, you know, you need to have perspective, like prepare for like have a plan B because the odds are stacked against you. But at some point for that person that is gonna make it, there is like, oh, this could actually be real. What did that look like?
Well, Matt was always academically inclined, so his goal was to get to the NCAA Division One and get a free education and play hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So he was never and be a pro. It's never like the attainable things that he thought I can do this would be
Hmm.
to get to college,
Right.
get a great education, and get in the back of his mind that might lead to professional opportunity, but his goal was to go to college,
Right.
and we're big on education in our family. So it in fact he was so focused on that that when he was 15, he went to the Major Junior A um, showcase, and he was invited there. He's one of the 12 goalies in Ontario Major Junior A hockey. What's called the OHL. And when he was interviewed after the games, the coach said, "So, Matt, you want to play?" The guys say, "Hey, you want to play which junior A hockey team?" He said, "Oh, I want to go to college." And they're like, "This is a showcase for like major junior hockey." Yeah. So he was so honest. He didn't play the game and say, "I'd love to play the OHL." So he didn't
Right.
get drafted. There was no draft. He didn't get drafted. He was like, "This kid wants to go to college." Now, the risk you take now that's changing because you major junior hockey players can go into college as of this year, I think. But if you chose the OHL, you could not go and play U.S. college hockey because you get a little
Right.
stipend every week or so,
Right.
so they consider you pros. So people would rush to major junior hockey because it was like right there. And Matt didn't have an offer from a college at 16. He had some general interest. So, but he knew what he wanted.
Right.
And then he worked towards that.
This is another thing that I think it's an interesting conversation because you know Matt wanted to his goal, it sounds like, was to go to college and get a scholarship, right? Now, sometimes it's the opposite where it's the parents that want the kids to do this so that way they can get their kid can get a scholarship because it does help the financial piece of paying for college. And I think for a kid, that's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. What's your take on that?
If it's your joint goal, you're going to have teamwork. In other words, because any high level sport, it's a family. The family's supporting the kid. So if
Mhm.
you look at, I have a friend that she wrote a book about hockey moms, and interviewed mothers of really successful hockey players. And like when a kid is at a high level, it's a family effort.
Yeah,
So as long as everybody's bought in and that's a joint goal, it wouldn't be great if you got to a great college or you went to, you know, but as soon as it's one person's goal, like the dad's, and it's just not resonating with the kid, that's when you run into difficulty. Because at the end of the day, like my son will retire from hockey soon, maybe this year, maybe next year. He's been playing 10 years. He wants to go and become, uh, a naturopath or a doctor of physical medicine or something. So eventually it's just a memory. It's like, oh,
hmm
remember that, remember that. It's like your sports are supposed to propel you forward, not keep you back. Like you can't, if you're living on what happened, it's like your priorities are like the priority is today and what decisions do I make today that'll make a difference in the world and in my family and my life tomorrow. Not how do I spend my time reflecting back on what did or didn't happen in my life. And I feel that if you put too much emphasis on a particular story, you might miss out on opportunities. Like if somebody had said, like there are a number of people who give up sports and then lo and behold, I saw a guy the other day who became a great musician and very
yeah,
successful. Didn't really start singing till he was like 14 or 15 and wanted to be a musician, but was rammed into youth sports. You're going to do this. And then when he left it, he was far more passionate and successful in the sport in what he chose. So I guess my short answer is it's all about alignment.
hmm
If the family's all in, um, that's a good thing. And if you're fortunate enough to have two parents in your family, sometimes somebody's more supportive and puts the big arm around the kid, and somebody's a little bit more, you know, uh, constructive in their criticism. You can
yeah.
balance out But ultimately, you have to have compassion. The kid is playing the game, not you. It's not your
Hmm.
game. You
Yeah.
had your chance. The game you're
Yeah.
playing now is the game of parenting. Wouldn't I rather be like when I'm at the end of my life and somebody's talking about his dad, would I want my son to say, like, he was such a hard ass, he pushed me into sports and I really liked everybody. Said my dad was just the kindest, most supportive, loving father you could ever imagine. And
Hmm.
he's made a difference in every side of my life. And that's what I want. I don't want like, my kid talking about how I made him cry on the way home from the game. And if you're listening to this and you're a dad, it's already hard to play a sport at an elite level. Your job is not to make it any harder. And if you're
Yeah.
contributing to the stress, we had a guy on Matt's team when he was 12 who developed an ulcer. Like he was another goalie. Like the parents were so on that case that the kid developed anxiety and an ulcer at like 12.
Yeah.
So what the hell? We used to joke that when they went home, if the kid got a shutout, they'd be having sex that night. It's like your whole affect as a family was based on your kid's performance. Like there's something that's off there. A lot of what about your day? It was a good day and your son had a good day or your daughter had a good day, but really? Your libido is tied to his success or her success? That's pretty unhealthy, in my opinion.
As as a hockey dad, what was your most proud moment?
Uh, I like when he won the bean pot in Boston against that's the Harvard Northeastern Boston College Boston University. I loved it when they played Big Red. It's a Cornell game against BU in Madison Square Garden. It's about 18,000 people, and they won 3-2. Being drafted to like signing a contract. Didn't get drafted to the NHL. Signed a contract after graduating from BU. Those are pretty proud moments. To be honest, Rocky, I'm proud of my kid for the way he lives his life, the
Yeah.
choices he makes every day. So those are proud sporting events.
Right.
They kind of don't mean anything. I'm proud of the man he is, the person
Yeah.
he's become, how he treats the fans, how the kids gravitate towards him, how he's doing. When he was in the AHL, he won the award on the team for most, beloved by the community, most community participation, food drives and things like that. That's more proud. I'd rather my son is like an incredible citizen
Yeah.
as opposed to a successful person and everybody thinks he's an asshole. Like there are a
Yeah.
lot of them out there, great athletes, but do you want to spend time with them? No. So that's kind of my being proud is more like having this respect for my son and what he's accomplished. And I have a daughter who's equally, she's not a professional athlete, but I'm equally proud of my daughter. It's not that, sports is just one thing that people focus on, but I'm very proud of my daughter and choices she's made in her life and the woman she's become as well. It's not, the external world does not validate how I think of my kids.
Yeah. I think that's super important. That's such a great answer. Um, where do you think parents are going wrong in youth sports today? Is it the monetization of it? Is it having too many travel teams? Is it
I don't,
having kids be overcoached?
I think that parents um, are influenced, heavily influenced. I mean, if we look at society now, we live in a society that's based on the currency is how much of your attention Facebook have or Instagram has or TikTok has. Like everybody wants our attention. Our attention
Hmm.
is monetized. The more watch that you watch YouTube, the more the YouTube creator gets paid. The more
Right.
clicks of this. So if you sort of advance that into parenting, then you could imagine that the messaging for parents could be very overwhelming
Hmm.
in terms of what's the best thing to do for your kid.
Hmm.
And so, where I think there's an opportunity, it's the same thing in life. It's like become a better critical thinker, evaluate the information that's available, step back, know your kid really well, and also think like what makes this base sense based on the research, not about what this coach says or that coach says or this person says or what Jimmy's doing or they're going to this thing. It's so easy to get pulled along and lose your autonomy and not really have a plan.
Hmm.
Um, and always be aware of what your children are saying about their participation in the sport, and not so much about whether they're getting the ice time or they're getting first line or they're in the rotation the way they should be, because
Hmm.
there are going to be times when they are not performing. They're not the best people on. They're the bottom third of the team. Um, but look at that in the perspective, like, is my kid getting better? Are they loving
Yeah.
what they do? Are they improving their skills? Um, Kids perform better at different ages based on where they are in their maturation cycle. Like the guy I was talking about who was getting all the playing time when Matt was 15, I guess he was. I mean, he could grow a full beard. My son
Yeah.
was still like Matt was like my son hadn't hit puberty yet. Like he was a late bloomer. He grew to 6'6" at the end of high school or college. He was freshman year. He's 110 pounds, and he was
Yeah.
like yeah, and he's like maybe 5'4". So know where your child is in their cycle. The other one I want to emphasize is that I can think of one family where their son was a defenseman, and he'd run some cross country in the fall, and he was an incredible runner. Like he was so fast, he would win by miles.
Hmm.
And both parents were quite small. I used to think like that kid's an NCAA like cross country runner,
Hmm.
but they kept him in hockey, and eventually he was just too small. He was a defenseman. He was a great skater, but you get to be 15, 16, and you're 130 pounds, like, and you're a defenseman. You're gonna get tossed. You have
Yeah.
contact at that level. So, and I always thought, like, can't they? So, in my mind, it was like, is it their dream that he becomes a great hockey player? Because he's gonna max out. Meanwhile, he's winning by a minute and a half in cross country. He's like,
Yeah.
can we not put him in a? Have you ever thought of having him joining, running cross country? But they wanted him to play hockey. I
Hmm.
don't. He liked playing hockey, but I'm sure he also liked winning races. That was fun.
Yeah.
But there
Winning's
was
fun.
Yeah, but so it's like, is it your kids? Is it your kid's dream? Or is it your dream? You
Yeah.
check in with your kids. You check in with your kids how you enjoy it. There are going to be times that they want to quit. So there's the
Yeah.
time that they want to quit, and there's the time when they've had enough. Because there's going
Yeah.
to be lots of times like this is hard work. I mean, he played a lot of hockey when he was like 12. He's on the ice 5 days a week. It was too
Hmm.
much.
Yeah.
But he liked it. He had a great group of friends. They're friends to this day. So it wasn't, he was just hanging out with the guys and playing some hockey. It wasn't triple A, it was double A. So
Yeah.
check in with your kids. No one is, when they will eventually have to make sure that you're not a part of the reason that they've had enough. There's a
Yeah.
lot of kids. Dad is, or mom is, it's usually dad, so hard on them that they get 15, 16 and they're done.
Hmm.
And usually when they're done and and they have all of a sudden all this free time, they may be on a way to being done in another way as well. Now they're smoking weed, they're hanging out with other kids, they're staying
Hmm.
out late. There's no container to keep them in a healthy place.
Yeah. What does that look like being being done where you're just like, I'm so burnt out, I don't even want to play anymore, versus just maybe being overworked and you need a little bit of a rest.
Okay, well, usually if you're done like dinner, and you had enough, and parents are like surprised, they've missed all sorts of warning signs.
Mm.
They put their head down and no, 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 we'll just book you. We're going to this tournament. We're gonna say, yeah, yeah. Their kids been telling them their own way. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
marriage. When you ask
Yeah.
a woman how long When did you separate? She said, when did you leave the marriage or a man? Like they said, well, I left last year and said, when did you really leave? I checked out about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So sometimes your child has checked out and you got on an
Yeah.
autopilot. And then eventually they get to a point where there's just they're burned out.
Yeah.
So just recognize the signs of burnout. And
Yeah.
signs of burnout for kids youth hockey is that they're not excited to go to
Hmm.
play. It's a chore. Um, Second of all, that physically they're starting to break down. They're tired, worn out. Third, that's all you're putting them in. They're not getting a chance to play lacrosse or play soccer
Hmm.
or do something else, play some, you know, basketball. Um, so usually when you're done, it's not like they wake up one day and say, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done. I don't want to play this anymore. What do you mean you
It's
don't want
been
to play?
brewing.
Yeah, it's been brewing for a while. How long have you been thinking about that? And then give your kids a break.
Yeah.
Like you've talked about this before. Like people rotate from one season to another to another. It's like, do you want to play a sport 12 months of the year? Like a few guys will because they're just passionate. A few girls will. But if you're like I think of a woman that I knew when I was growing up who she may be the last Canadian athlete to do this. She was in those days in 1976. The summer and winter Olympics were on the same year. So right now they
Hmm.
flipped them so that they're 2 years, every 4 years they're winter Olympics, but it's not the same year that the summer Olympics are. It's kind of like the way the Senate works in the United States. There's an overlap. Um,
Yeah.
but she skied cross country and then she paddled as a kayaker in the Olympics. So she was in.
Uh,
So you know that when the canoeing and kayaking season ended in the end of August, September, she was training now for cross country skiing. And
mhm.
when the cross country season ended in February, March, she was going down to Florida to do her spring training on the water. So
Yeah.
she was training all year round, but she was
Constantly.
training for two sports. And she made
Yeah.
it that she was an Olympian in two sports.
Yeah.
Pretty
I think that
powerful
was one
stuff.
of the things that that really helped me was when it was football season, I played football. When it was basketball season, I played basketball. When it was baseball season, I played baseball. I didn't cross the two. And I think what it did that I enjoyed each season, right? I enjoyed, I didn't forget how to shoot a basketball or I didn't forget how to swing a baseball bat, you know. But when I was playing that sport, I was all in on that sport. Like that's all I did, and then it was time just to move on to the next sport. And so I enjoyed when the seasons came around, and that's why I feel like I had so much fun playing sports. And I also think it's why, I guess still today, like I love to play, whether it's
Yeah.
basketball or just throwing the football around. Like I love to play. I think not specializing in playing one sport all year round really really helped me with that.
Two things that you just said that I really love. First of all, you obviously loved it enough that now you're coaching kids at sports.
Yeah,
So,
I'm
so
still I'm still that kid.
yeah, you're still like and playing sports. And the second one is the playing of sports.
Hmm.
So one season, this is just something I did. Every time I took my son to the rink for practice, I didn't lean up against the boards like the rest of the guys drinking Tim Horton coffee in Canada. I went for a run while he was on the ice. I would come back 15 minutes before he'd get off the ice. And so my son would, like, he remembers that. He'd say, like, my dad is not a passive sit around. My dad is working out at the same time that I'm working out.
Yeah,
So I think that I just was I being really thoughtful about that, or was I just one of those guys who just didn't like standing around and shoot the shit? I'd rather be working out. Um, but it made an impression on him, and I did that for an entire season, which is like I thought, like I am not going to stand around. I'm taken to the rink for practice at 7 o'clock. I'm running. In
yeah,
Canada, I'm running outdoors in the snow, so I got my
yeah,
running tights on, my gloves, and my shell and my hat. Um, but he knew that, and as another season I would run the stairs in the rink when I took him. Like I do my own dryland training while he's on the ice. Like what else are you gonna do? So that I think embedded in him the thing that you're in here for the long run. Like I'm still active, and I'm like, and I can continue to want to be active. So it wasn't that I finished my sport and now I'm going to focus on my kids' sport. It was like, we're a sporting active family. My dad's doing his thing. I'm doing my thing. So I would go out and run races and things like that. And I'd be competitive and want to do well. And he saw it as a part of my life.
Hmm.
So, pardon me because I'm in a country right now that's extremely fan based. But there's some pity. I've heard some pretty strong people talking about, for sure you guys are going to hate me for this, but wandering around with a grown man's jersey with his name on your back. Like, wouldn't you rather just wander around with your own jersey? You're like there's something about that fan mentality that sometimes is so extreme that you forget about who you are. You're not embodied. You are living your life through your team.
Hmm.
And that's okay if you're also living your life.
Yeah.
But if you've given up your autonomy, your sense of self, who you are, what you live for, what's your purpose, what's the family about, and it is dependent on some uncontrolled events that are being happening in front of you, then I think that we have fallen victim to being influenced by the machine that wants you not to think for yourself. It's one thing to be like you're a huge fan, but you're also a big, you coach kids and you're really active. So your immersion in sports is from a participant, from a fan, and from a teacher. I think that's super healthy. But if your only connection to health and fitness is by projecting yourself into somebody's playing, they have a bad day. I'm sure guys like somebody has, I'm sure in your family a little bit, if Notre Dame plays poorly at Sunday, if there's a bit of a hangover the next day, maybe, or Saturday, maybe. But in the extreme case, you see it in Latin American countries, somebody makes a mistake, the ref gets killed or somebody gets like their whole life revolves around what's happening outside of them. So, as parents, you got to make sure, like, is my life defined by my kid's sporting experience? Or am I happy with my own life? Am I comfortable with who I am? Those are things that come up
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
I'm probably these are kinds of things that might be controversial and people would challenge me on these things, but I ultimately think we have the best parenting we can do is by being the best person we can be.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's good. I think they make for great conversation. And, I would agree. The best, if you make yourself better as a person, and again, I'm not a parent, but if your pursuit is making yourself better, then I think you're going to parent your kids better in those situations on their journey.
Now, you've said that a couple times. I'm not a parent. I just want to highlight what you're doing is you're learning parenting skills by coaching. When you coach youth and you see the dynamics amongst a group of kids, you also get to see other parents. You absorb all of those lessons.
Yeah.
You will see kids, and I'm sure you've had it where the parents have brought them to you for some personal training, and the way in which that parent interacts with their child, you have an aversion to. You're like, oh my God, like what? I would not want to be part of that family. And there are other
Yeah.
parents, they show up and they're golden. You're like, whoa, that guy's a freaking dream dad. She's a dream mom. Look at how this is going. Like I'll tell you a quick story. A friend of mine did um, some work. She built a house with a group of people in Mexico, and one day they went to visit this orphanage with 25 kids, and then they took the kids to like a splash park or something like that. These kids were living in an orphanage. They were 25, their age from about like 2 to 16. And she said, I have never seen a better, more well-behaved families. Like that family, that was like a family. They were helping each other and loving each other. And she said, I could tell that the culture of that orphanage was such that they had taught each other how to take care of each other and how to be respectful. And it was time to go. It was time to go now. She was saying, compared to some of the families that I see and some of
Huh.
my friends, like they're two kids and they're under control. It's like, what was going on in that orphanage where those kids did not have a connection to biological parents? They certainly had some love, a lot of love. So where I'm going with this is that you can absorb so many things as a potential parent
Mhm.
from the environment you're in. You gotta be you gotta be open to it. I know that I didn't want to be the kind of parent or father that I had. So in a sense, the kind of father I am is a direct result of my father's inability to know what to do as a parent. So I thought I don't want to be clueless like my dad. He didn't have a clue about how his behavior impacted us. I'll drill down, dial in, get more connected to my kids than and the beneficiaries are that are me. I feel happier, and my kids feel. So you're learning tons as a coach.
Yeah.
As you'll be ready to go. I don't want to make that premature, like you're gonna pop one out, but never underestimate the fact that like what you're doing is basically training yourself for your next experience.
Yeah, I certainly do think about it when I have kids and how I want to show up as a parent and on their journey, especially in sports. Like I definitely want to be involved as much as I can, but if they don't want me to be involved, then you know, no, I'm not going to push. But I do think about how I want to show up, and I want to show up whenever that time comes
Yeah.
as best I can to support them. Well, Kevin, you have a lot of great insight. And your experience as a hockey dad, and you've obviously done an amazing job with both of your kids, and as they've both had amazing success. Tell me about the hat that you got on. What are you up to? Where can people find you if they want to reach out or interact with you?
Yeah, this is Men of Means. This is a group that I have a leadership role in. It's a group of men across North America and in Europe, and it's for men who are at a place in their life where they don't really haven't figured out what their purpose is, and we talk a lot about prayer and intention and radical responsibility and taking ownership and making a contribution. So it's a very heart-based group of men, and it's menofmeans.org, and so I'm very involved in that. I'm a mentor and a guide. I would describe myself as a professional mentor. My background is as a CEO of a number of companies, and so at this point in my life, I love mentoring young entrepreneurs. And so life and mentorship, business mentorship, and supporting. There's a lot of challenges that men in society have now, where the statistics are quite outstanding in terms of the amount of men who are feeling disconnected and lonely and don't have a significant other in their life and don't have the prospect right now of forming deep relationships with women or men. The average man my age has like one friend. You
Mhm.
just don't have friends.
Yeah.
There's no, a lot of women have an innate ability to build community. Men have a very difficult time building community. If there's nothing so sometimes sporting events and hanging around the bar and having a pint is the best thing they have to brotherhood.
Yeah.
But that only is somewhat transient. It doesn't really extend. You get sick, all of a sudden you're struggling. You've got to challenge whether your kids like who do
Mhm.
you turn with. So I'm all about trying to. Well, I've learned some stuff in my life, just sharing it, and that's mentorship to me is a very overarching concept. It's basically about taking care of people and sharing and taking responsibility for your own behavior and where you are in your life.
Well, thank you for doing what you do. You're certainly impacting not just a lot of men, but a lot of people out there. So keep doing what you're doing, and I'll link all of those things in the show notes so that people can can access it and continue to follow you and see what you're doing. So, Kevin,
Great.
thanks
It's been a pleasure.
thanks for
Nice
being on the
chatting. I
show.
always like spending time with you, Rocky.
Of course.
Okay, Rocky.
All right.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.